Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this edition of 30 on Thursdays, SusQtech's bi-weekly webinar series on everything and anything to do with SharePoint. This week, we're going to talk about 3 strategies for making enterprise video valuable in SharePoint. We'll get into that in just a second, but I always like to start off with some housekeeping. For those of you joining us for the first time, 30 on Thursdays is a series that we've been doing here at SusQtech going on about 2 years. Where we take a topic, anything to do with SharePoint, and we cover it in about 30 minutes or less to give you an opportunity to learn about all sorts of different things having to do with SharePoint. Our next one is scheduled for February 7th, and that will be top 10 uses for jQuery in SharePoint 2010. Kyle Schaefer is going to walk through some of the cool things you can do with jQuery and where we see that used most frequently. You can get the full schedule of our upcoming webinars at susqtech.com/webinars. Today's session is being recorded. You will be able to download that like any other 30 on Thursday at susqtech.com/archive-webinars. And if you have questions for myself or Nathan during today's presentation, please use the question window. I think it's located on most people's on the right-hand side of your screen as part of GoToWebinar. One of the other things that we do here at SusQtech, in addition to the 30 on Thursdays and all the other things we do around SharePoint, we do a lot of other online, what I'll say more formalized classes on SharePoint. These are 3-hour formats. They're webinars, but they are part of our training curriculum. Our next one of those is scheduled for January 31st, and that's Maximizing Search in SharePoint 2010. We also have a 2-day online course coming up in March for those of you that have Nintex Workflow 2010. We have a 2-day class where we get really deep into using Nintex Workflow to automate business processes. And you can get information of that at susqtech.com/online training. And we have a bunch of past recordings of those that you can are available for purchase, covering everything from metadata to design to document management to developer authentication and authorization topics. Those are available at susqtech.com/online training. So again, today's topic is 3 strategies for making enterprise video valuable in SharePoint 2010. Our presenter today is Nathan Treloar from RAMP. I'm Steve Witt, and I will be your moderator. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Nathan. Welcome, Nathan.
Thank you, Steve, and good afternoon, everybody. I want to first thank SusQtech and Steve for the opportunity to present to you today in this great resource, these 30 on Thursday. As you saw in the title of the session, we're going to talk about strategies for making enterprise video valuable inside SharePoint. And to set a tone for this session, this is not a deep technical session, but hopefully we'll get you thinking about how you use SharePoint and the opportunities for including video as more of a native citizen in your SharePoint environment. So with that, I'm going to share my screen and we'll jump into the next session. And just if you can confirm, Steve, that you can see my screen.
Yep, looks good.
Great. All right, well, let's get going. So very quick background on RAMP. RAMP is a provider of video content management solutions, especially focused on not just management, but publishing, search, and ultimately delivery of video in enterprise environments as well as online media environments. And we promote the concept of making video valuable. And what you'll see what I mean by that as I go through this, but very generally, what our experience is that as video grows as a communication tool, there's not only a need to make sure that you have the infrastructure to manage it, but there's a need and really a desire and a business requirement to be able to drive much value as you possibly can out of it, regardless of the use case. So as a business, RAMP has been focused, as it says down here, on major media as well as enterprise customers. So we focused on delivering video in across a variety of use cases ranging from online Marcom, marketing communication, to inside the firewall corporate use cases. So you might ask the question, it's probably not even needed to be asked anymore these days, but why does it matter? The bottom line is that people are demanding video. Video as a communication tool is growing on the web, and as evidenced by the success of sites like YouTube and similar kinds of video delivery sites, but also it's growing as a communication tool in the enterprise. So whether you put much credence to any of these particular quotes, it's definitely the case that video as a communication tool is growing, and Gartner would report that anywhere between 50 to 200% annually is the growth rate that we're seeing for video as a tool inside corporations. We actually did a survey with the Aberdeen Group a couple months back to understand how people are using video in enterprise settings, and we were not terribly surprised. It's fairly obvious how video is being consumed. Corporate communications, so this is sort of executive briefings or senior management briefings to the employees. Learning and development, simply e-learning and online training is an obvious use for video. But also knowledge sharing and management. So if you can imagine scenarios where, as SusQtech is doing with these 30 on Thursday sessions, where they're recording them, that's happening more and more often. So these sessions get recorded, they get persisted someplace, and increasingly there's an interest to be able to tap into those to treat them in the same way that other kinds of knowledge are being treated. And then there are other use cases, marketing, as I mentioned, driving brand and awareness, external training use cases, customers and partners, and finally even customer service. So across all these use cases we see decent penetration in terms of current use and definite increase in interest in growing across each of these use cases. But there are some challenges with enterprise video, and as it says in the title of this session, there are 3 strategies for making video valuable, and not terribly surprising, they actually tie back to these challenges. The first one that we've encountered, and it's not terribly surprising, is around video infrastructure. Video is different. It's different than other kinds of communication, documents, etc. And what we know is the case is that a lot of corporations are trying to get their arms around how best to manage the storage and delivery of video at an infrastructure level. So whether that's handling the storage of large video files, to drive the point home, we know that in SharePoint the default file size limit for an out-of-the-box implementation of SharePoint is 250 megabytes. And it's not uncommon to have a video file that exceeds that. So having the ability to simply store large video files is the first requirement. The second requirement is to be able to efficiently deliver video to all the endpoints. And efficient delivery means being able to deal with varying bandwidth requirements across the enterprise and across the web. And also being able to deliver the various endpoints. So as you see in the diagram here, there are a lot of different types of devices that people are using these days to consume video. It's not just a laptop or PC anymore, it's tablets and smartphones. And each one of these devices has their own peculiar requirements for how video can be received, whether it's different formats or presentation form factors, etc. Each requires their own type of delivery mechanism. Second challenge is integration with existing systems that people are using every day in the enterprise. And the nature of this conversation is centered around SharePoint. That is an example of a very dominant enterprise content management and collaboration environment. But what we know is that there are opportunities to improve upon the integration of video inside SharePoint. And I'll talk about that in some detail in a second. The third one, and one that I think isn't given enough attention, is the challenges related to search and accessibility. Video is a peculiar form factor in the sense that the textual information that's attached to a video isn't always enough to affect a good search experience. And you're highly dependent on whatever metadata is attached to a video object. So if it has a title, maybe a description, a few keywords, that's what you have at your disposal to include that video into a traditional search engine. Search engines depend on text. They're text-based engines for the most part. And the absence of metadata is a problem when it comes to search and accessibility. So these are 3 challenges that we know exist for video in the enterprise. So tying back to sort of the theme of this session, what we believe are the key strategies to delivering video successfully in the enterprise are across those same 3 axes. First, you have to get the basics right. You need to be able to ensure that you have a way of storing video that respects the fact that video files can be quite large, and that it's not simply a matter of it's just copying a file from one folder to another. The upload time for moving videos around is something to be taken into consideration. And in the other direction, the ability to efficiently distribute and stream video to all the targets around the organization. On the web, there are systems like content distribution networks from companies like Akamai that specialize in delivering video and other types of asset efficiently from edge servers. And that concept exists in particular with video. So local caching and other techniques like that are part of getting the basics right. And then streaming to handle the adaptive streaming to deal with different bandwidths and different geographic locations and different network connectivity that might exist in different remote geographic locations. And then the encoding part of the basics is back to those different devices. Each device requires their own codecs or encoding. So being able to understand that there are recipes for delivering to these different devices and making sure that you have the basics for encoding. On the integration with the CMS side, in particular with SharePoint, that's just a statement. Integration with familiar tools is important, and the nature of the conversation on this call is, how is that affected inside SharePoint? The tools that people use every day. And then the third point, ensuring effective discovery and engagement. As I kind of said at the beginning, video is valuable if it can be found and if it's watched. If you can't find it, it has no value. It's like creating a document and putting it off in a file share, never to be seen again. And so we think these are the three principal tenets for deriving value in enterprise video. So we'll talk now for a second on what's available in SharePoint. Let's look at SharePoint 2010. I'm not going to go back to 2007. We'll just look at 2010 for a second. There are a number of enhancements that came into 2010 to improve the manageability and deliverability of video. The concept of asset libraries was first, the ability to store and manage rich media assets, not just video but audio and images as well, but also to be able to include thumbnail-centric views. So that was an addition in 2010. It made it easier to visualize the inclusion of media assets. Second thing that was added was the concept of a media web part, which allowed you to configure a video player experience inside SharePoint. And the third thing was the notion of content query web parts now being able to support video objects. But even with these enhancements, there was still a fair number of gaps. And 2013 has made a few improvements, so it's worth looking at some of the capabilities that have been added. So in 2013, they enhanced this concept of a digital asset library to make it easier to upload video objects, to upload videos not just upload the entire object, but also reference videos. So you include a pointer to the video wherever it may live, and it can live on an external system even. That's a powerful concept because it allows you to include the video and manage the video in the context of SharePoint without having to deal with pulling it into the system. And then the ability to select thumbnails, thumbnail concept on videos just ensures that when you're looking at videos in a list or in a library, you can get a glimpse of what it looks like without having to open it up and launch the player. Second thing they did in 2013 is add HTML5 player support. So that means that delivery of video across devices that support HTML5 is ensured. So if you need to be able to run it on an iPad, for example, as long as you can launch an HTML5 player, you have support for that. Second thing they did, not so much related to HTML5, was the ability to have this video player page. So it's essentially a container that allows you to see not only the video itself, but also have metadata attached to that video, as well as other actions that you might want to associate with the video, whether it's tagging or somehow including that video in this new newsfeed concept that exists in 2013. And then the third thing that was added was tighter search integration. So results, thumbnails, and previews allow you to just visualize the thumbnails or to visualize the imagery in that video and preview the video without having to launch the full-on player experience. That concept of video previews is much more prevalent in the search experience in 2013, not just specific to video but to documents as well. But it's not all done yet. There's plenty that's still missing in SharePoint 2013. While they do support the ability to define different output formats for videos, you can set different resolution types, and it will create and persist different resolutions so that the end user can select which resolution they want in the player. There isn't support for truly adaptive streaming. There isn't integrated support for content distribution to be able to handle, say, a local caching across a distributed organization. The concept of flexible encoding and transcoding recipes, to use the parlance, is not part of it. You can set up different encoding libraries, DLLs essentially, for different target devices, but it's a bit of a customization process, so it's not built into the system. It is possible to do, but it's not native. The concept of a bulk import, so if you have, for example, a file system that's filled with an archive of video, the ability to bulk load those into SharePoint is not a native and out-of-the-box experience. Not to say it's not possible, but it requires a little specialized scripting. So I also use the word here, crawl. Search engines use the word crawl to describe a process where it goes out and crawls a file system and looks for content and objects to bring into the search index. That notion applies to video as well, but it's not something that's a native part of the library import or library construction process. And then storage. There's still the 2 GB file size limit within SharePoint. That hasn't gone away. One way to get around it, of course, is to include a reference, a pointer to the video wherever it lives, as opposed to trying to load it into SharePoint itself. But another way to solve it, of course, is to have a cloud-based storage option, which doesn't impose file size limits, can have flexibility in bringing in a larger set of content. Clipping, simple editing is also not a native part of it. And then importantly, I think, and to a theme that I'll get to in a second, there is no support for transcript generation and transcript search. And somewhat related to that, the ability to encode time-coded information on the video. If you think about a video object, it has a length to it, and the ability to jump into the timeline of the video to different places where concepts are referenced is not supported. And that means that the ability to create these more interactive player experiences, I'll show you a demo of in a second, isn't possible. And live streaming is not there yet. Microsoft acknowledges that's really not really a strength of what they're trying to deliver in SharePoint. So there's quite a lot that's yet to be done in SharePoint, but there's some simple things that can bring video more as a first-class citizen above and beyond even what's coming in 2013. And so this kind of gets to this concept of time-coded metadata. What you're seeing here is a player experience that we've implemented for other customers that takes advantage of a concept that's called transcription, which builds a spoken word analysis of the audio in a video file to generate a time-coded transcript. And what this allows you to do is not only create a set of metadata, additional information on that video that you can expose to search, but it also allows you to build these more interactive player experiences that drive engagement of the video. So we speak to time-coded metadata in 2 propositions. First, it helps deliver more effective search, because with the full payload of all the transcript information in there, you now have a set of information that otherwise would not be available to the search engine. So think of it as essentially converting this video into a full-on document where the full spoken word audio is now part of the experience. Second thing it does is that because we time-coded each of the words and phrases that show up in the timeline of the video, you increase engagement. People tend to consume more video if they have the ability to navigate and direct their starting point of the video to a certain place in time. If you're dealing with a 60-minute training video and you want to find that one place where a certain concept was found, currently your only recourse, if you can find a video at all, is to start the video and hope that you'll find it, or hunt and peck in the timeline and hope that you find it. With time-coded metadata, you have the ability to search directly into the timeline. So let me jump out. I'm going to show you a couple quick demos and then we'll wrap it up. So for those of you who are familiar with the standard SharePoint 2010 environment, you'll recognize this SharePoint view. And standard SharePoint features for ability to create sites, new objects in the system, configure settings. We're using the standard Contoso brand, which is the Microsoft's fictional company. So I'm going to point out the impact of including transcript information in the video. So if I do a search for, I'm going to do a search for, let's see, a fast engine. I happen to know that there's a video that talks about fast in here. So what you're seeing here is a search result that takes advantage of an additional payload of metadata that otherwise isn't available to SharePoint. So in the search result, you see the normal, and this is obviously fast search within 2010, because for those of you who are not familiar with fast search shows you the numbers on these refiner counts. If I narrow the search result to just Media Cloud video, what this does is it allows me to see only those videos that make mention, or excuse me, only those videos that have been processed by, in this case, an external service to generate transcripts. So this external service pulls the audio, processes the audio, converts it to text, and delivers video more as a native document within the search experience. Because we have the timecode information, we can also do things like jump to the place in the timeline where my query term was found. So if I mouse over these mini thumbnails, you'll see that what it's doing is it's identifying where the word that I searched for shows up in the timeline of the video. And if I click on any one of these, what it'll do is it will launch a player experience that takes you directly to that place in the timeline. So going back to, I'm going to pause this for a second. Let me just point out a few things. Within this player experience, which takes advantage of this time-coded metadata, you see this concept of words that show up in the timeline of the video. And effectively, what happens if I click on any one of these, it's going to do a query into the timeline of the video and show me all the different places in the timeline where this particular word was found. The effect of this in this particular video, which is only 5 minutes long, is that it allows me to navigate to directly that place in time where the concept I'm interested in shows. Because this particular video player also takes advantage of the SharePoint features, you can do things like activate social sharing, which also increases engagement and consumption of the video, whether you want to share it starting at that point in time in the video or sharing the entire video. You have the option to do either in this particular reference implementation. You can also use the standard social sharing features, etc. So back to the kind of the strategy theme of this. The strategy for making video more native is sort of across these three axes. And what SharePoint does is, particularly in 2013, is it makes it easier to provide the basic foundation. So there are some features that will allow you to more easily upload video into SharePoint and manage it more natively inside SharePoint. The search implementation is better. There's still room for improvement, and RAMP is in the business of essentially extending SharePoint to address those gaps that I showed on that previous slide. The second theme is native integration with the standard tools. The fact that this is a SharePoint conversation would highlight the fact that SharePoint is a very common content management environment, and we want to make video more natively accessible and manageable in that environment. One way to do that is to take advantage of transcription services to make the video object more kind of natively managed through the tools that are text-based within SharePoint. Search being an example, but it could also apply to workflow, etc. And likewise, social sharing. And then the third thing around search and discovery, we have had great success in using this transcription service to drive increased discovery through search, but also to increase the engagement. So if you look at these kind of player experiences, what we have in the metrics we've captured at RAMP, we know from those data and those analytics that the number of videos that are watched increases by about 70%, and the number of videos that are watched to completion increases by about 80%. So you get more value out of your video simply by having this additional discovery feature, but also by having the more interactive player experiences that are exemplified here. So we got about 4 minutes left. There's quite a lot more we could talk about this, but I want to make sure that we kept on that theme of these strategies. So to leave you with that last point, make sure that you have, as part of your SharePoint deployment, considered the infrastructure. How are you going to store this? RAMP has a service called Media Cloud, which provides cloud-based storage that's seamlessly integrated with SharePoint, but we're not the only game in town. There are other services that do this sort of thing. Make sure that you're taking advantage of the features that are in SharePoint. 2010 has some additional capabilities, but there's a few more things coming in 2013. And definitely look at transcription capabilities, whether they're automated, such as the example here, or even editorial services for the high-value content you might be creating. With those transcripts, as part of the video experience, you create much more discovery through search, and you create much better experiences on the player side. Steve, I'll turn it back to you. If we have questions, we can take them now.
Great, thanks, Nathan. That was great. Yeah, we have a couple really good questions I'd like to get into here. The first is about security, and is there anything in the product that would be for handling security of certain videos, or is that natively handled by the CMS, in this case, SharePoint?
Yeah, so in the case of the RAMP Media Cloud offering, we use the native security inside SharePoint. So even for our cloud-based storage, the access control is handled by access control in SharePoint. You cannot start and watch a video that you do not have read access to. The details on how that's handled for the cloud-based delivery is that we use a signed URL technique, which means that when the requester comes in and asks for the stream start, they're given a signed URL that is only good for their session, so it can't be shared beyond their usage. For SharePoint natively, obviously, it's using the SharePoint security environment.
Gotcha. Great. The next question, again, another good one. To take advantage of the transcription services, how does that work? And do you need to provide access to the farm, or is this kind of uploaded externally to get the transcription back? How does that whole process kind of work?
Yeah, so in our implementation, what we've done is we've set it up so that you have these Media Cloud library, and if I could jump back here for a second, I'll show you what that looks like. Media Cloud library is a type of library in the SharePoint parlance. And the process of including video into Media Cloud Library also ensures that it gets processed for transcription. I didn't show this because we didn't have a lot of time. But the process of uploading it actually will run it through a speech-to-text model where those transcripts are generated. So what you're looking at here is essentially the upload process for in this case, the RAMP Media Cloud integration. Third-party transcription service, if you're using something other than RAMP, will have their own techniques. You can implement these kind of integrations yourself, but the RAMP implementation is based on controls that are installed with your SharePoint farm and that seamlessly integrate with our backend Media Cloud service. So from the perspective of the end user, they're just adding a video to the library, and behind the scenes it gets transcribed, encoded, stored, and staged for streaming.
Great. Yeah, so basically, just to recap that, is if you use the RAMP transcoding services, it's all kind of built in. It's native SharePoint. You do the upload using a special content type. It does all the transcription and stores it all in there, and then has it available in search, which is I think one of the main benefits of having it kind of all self-contained.
That's right.
Next question is, what are the kind of the formats? You can briefly cover the formats for the video that you're showing here on the player. Is first of all, is the player, you said HTML5?
This particular, so our player experience is designed to layer on top of the various de facto and standard players that are out there. This one happens to be built on a Flash player, I believe. Yep. We have an HTML5 player framework as well. The way we present this is as a reference implementation, so the entire package comes with the entire code set, which includes the HTML and JavaScript implementation. And it's designed to be extended in and customize depending on which features you want to activate. So if, for example, you don't want these little blue dots to mark in the timeline, you can change those to anything you want. Or you want to disable certain features, you can. But we have HTML5, a Silverlight version. We have a Flash version, ones that are built on FlowPlayer, etc. These all come with the package. And regarding formats, just quickly, because I know we're over time, our transcoding service will take pretty much any kind of video format. So if you want to upload a Flash file or a .mov or an MPEG-4 or a Windows Media file, we'll take whatever format it comes in, and we'll preserve that, but also encode it into whatever target formats that are required on the streaming side. That's the encoding infrastructure.
Great. Well, I think that that does it for our questions, and we are right at the top of the hour. So again, Nathan, I'd like to thank you. I'm going to go ahead and take control back here just so I can show my final slide with our contact information. All right, you should be, Nathan, you see my screen?
Not yet.
All right, let's see.
Oh, now I do.
Okay, great. So again, thanks again, Nathan. I appreciate the time. This was great. I know a lot to get through in a half hour, but the idea is to show the people what, when I saw this and a number of the other people here at SusQtech saw RAMP at the SharePoint conference back in November, very impressive in the way it's just natively integrated with SharePoint and handles a lot of those things that were certainly more cumbersome to do in native SharePoint. So again, thank you again for your time. If anybody out there needs to get a hold of or wants to learn more about RAMP, you can contact Nathan, his email's up there, or you can contact me, and we can get you in touch and we'll set up a demo. And with that, I'd like to thank everybody for their time today, and we'll see you in 2 weeks where we're going to talk about jQuery.